All right, investigative journalist Peter Schweizer is out with a brand new book. He's a New York Times bestselling author. He's out with the book now, Blood Money: How the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye to China Killing Americans. Now, this is another side of this piece, other than the illegal immigrants that are coming in here, killing the likes of Lake and Riley and many others, the rapists, the murderers, the drug dealers. The CCP has infiltrated this country, and nobody knows it better than Peter Schweizer. He's a New York Times bestselling author. He is an editor at Breitbart, and he's got all the super-duper degrees, right? Oxford University, George Washington University. He's written many, many academic books and papers. He's a former research fellow at the Hoover Institute. Okay, need I say more? So he's going to come in here now, and we're going to talk about his new book, Blood Money. The link to the book is down there in the description below. Let's help it get back on the New York Times bestseller. Let's help Peter get back on the New York Times bestseller list with Blood Money. Let's do our part here. Get down there. Anybody you know that's a patriot, get them a copy of this book. Somebody that may not be familiar with what's going on with the CCP and China, get them this book. Nobody knows about it more than Peter Schweizer. So let's bring him on here now. All right, let's do this. Joining me now, Peter Schweizer. Welcome to the Alec Show.
Hey, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's an honor to have you here. You have the new book out, Blood Money: Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye When China Kills Americans. I just, before you came on, I had Congressman Scott Perry on the podcast here. We were talking about the problems at this open border, obviously the Lake and Riley death, the murder by this illegal immigrant. We didn't focus on this part of it, this epidemic of what China is doing here. And obviously all eyes are on the border. China is aiding Mexico in killing more than 150 Americans a day with the fentanyl that's coming into this country.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, people think of the fentanyl crisis as something caused by the drug cartels. The drug cartels are the junior partners. It's the CCP that runs this. They provide the precursors, of course. A lot of people know that. Those precursors go into a port in Mexico that's controlled by a Chinese company. Those precursors then get turned into fentanyl because 2,000 Chinese nationals live in a town in northern Mexico. They create the fentanyl. The pill presses they use to make this poison come from China. The communications devices that the drug cartels use to communicate with each other, those devices are encrypted in China because they know China won't share that with U.S. law enforcement. And the money laundering done by the drug cartels. They used to, in the days of cocaine, launder their money in Latin American banks. They now do it in Chinese state-owned banks. So it is a Chinese operation, and our political leaders are largely silent on this issue.
Yeah, and Peter, you know what's interesting is when China hit us with the coronavirus there and was killing Americans with that, they had the ticker on the CNN. They always had the ticker. How many people were dying of COVID? You would think they could have a fentanyl ticker on the TV right now. You get 150 Americans each day dying of this. This thing is affecting families. It's crippling just the basic fundamental foundation of our society, which is the American family. And so many are losing brothers and sons and sisters and mothers, all because of this attack. This is an act of war, basically, from China.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the vast majority of people dying of fentanyl poisoning don't even know they're taking fentanyl. They think they're taking Adderall or Vicodin or something like that. It's the leading cause of death among Americans under the age of 45. Every year from fentanyl poisoning, we suffer more deaths than the combat deaths that we had in Vietnam and Korea. It is a declaration of war on the United States, and we're not doing anything about it. The only thing the administration touts is that they put economic sanctions on Chinese officials caught involved in the fentanyl trade. There was a guy named Juan who they put these sanctions on in 2021. 3 months after they put the sanctions on him, he was given an award by the CCP, and he gave a rousing speech where he kind of laughed at all of this and said, oh, you know, I and my criminal gang fellows, we are going to help China defeat the United States. So they're laughing at this. They don't take any of this seriously. Joe Biden says that he talks to Xi about this issue, but there's no finger pointing. It's time for there to be finger pointing and action to be taken.
Yeah, and we see what happens when Xi Jinping comes to the United States. He's in San Francisco. They swiped out all the homelessness, were swept off the street and then allowed right back as soon as he left. It's a joke the way that we're handling this. They're flying spy balloons over the United States, and we roll out the welcome mat for this guy. But you know, we just had, and I was just talking to the congressman about this. We had Hunter Biden testifying before the congressman closed door hearing, and obviously there's a connection with the Biden family and Xi Jinping and the CCP, and there's business dealings that are there. They can't seem to quite put their finger on it to get the smoking gun to nail them to this, but it's obvious that this is the reason why they are so silent about what China is doing to this country. Is that what you go into detail here in the book?
Oh, absolutely. I was the one that broke the story on Chinese money going to the Biden family back in 2018. Of course, they denied it was true. We now know it's true. But what I point out in the new book, Blood Money, is that there's really only 1 degree of separation between the Biden family, the first family of the United States, and those involved in the fentanyl trade. The Sinaloa cartel in Mexico, they're the kings of fentanyl. Everybody acknowledges that. Everybody also acknowledges that a Chinese gang called UBG are the ones that made them the kings of fentanyl. The head of that criminal syndicate is a guy named Zhang Anlo, who goes by the name White Wolf. Head of the criminal gang, sets up the Sinaloa cartel in the fentanyl trade that's poisoning Americans. He has a business partner. That business partner in 2017 gave the Bidens a $5 million forgivable interest-free loan, which they've never repaid. So there's 1 degree of separation. So does Joe Biden want to talk about fentanyl? Does Joe Biden want to talk about what China's involvement in this? Absolutely not, because it will blow back on his family.
And this is why, too, you love to hear like Donald Trump will say, hey, we got to attack these cartels, use the military. We got to treat what they're doing is an act of war against the country. So it should be treated that way. And when you hear him talk about death penalty for these drug dealers that are doing this, it almost seems as if people are willing to accept this on the left. They're like, well, we're just going to ignore it. We're going to accept it. We're going to allow all these families to just be destroyed by something that's fixable. It's not like this is incurable. It's not like we can't stop this. This is something that we can actually go and attack and root out of our society here.
That's right. And again, let's remember the people that are dying, the vast majority who die of fentanyl overdoses don't know they're taking fentanyl. People get confused and sometimes think this is like a heroin overdose or a cocaine overdose. It's not. It's completely different. This is lethal. This is hidden. People don't even know that they're taking it. That's what makes it so evil. So this is not a drug addiction problem. This is a poisoning problem that is perpetuated and organized in Beijing.
And let's get to this too here, because I know that you have a chapter in the book here talking about TikTok, and TikTok obviously is a Chinese-owned company, and I believe that they wouldn't even allow you to advertise this book, I would imagine, right, on TikTok. Is that correct?
Right. That's right. We tried, but they wouldn't let us.
Right. No surprise there. But the threat of TikTok to the kids, like I have 3 teenage boys. This is an epidemic. This TikTok is so addicting to the kids in this country. It's almost as if, like, the cigarettes of when I was growing up, like that, the addiction is so compulsive. And I think they get that same dopamine hit that you get from either gambling or drinking or drugging. You're getting that same dopamine hit when you're on this social media. And this TikTok is poisoning the minds of our kids in this country. And it almost seems as if we're all kind of laughing about it a little bit. It's like, oh, did you see this TikTok trend and all this stuff? But what's happening here is real sinister from China.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things I do in the book is I quote extensively from Chinese officials, people in the Chinese military, people from the Chinese Ministry of Propaganda. We're debating in this country, is TikTok a threat? Is it not a threat? They're not having a debate in China. A Chinese official, I quote him in the book, says this is the Trojan horse in which we can engage with the United States. And I lay out specifically how they are using TikTok to subconsciously and consciously condition our children to reject their own historical past. Thereby, once they do that, they are going to be available for new ideas and concepts that are being pushed by the CCP. So make no mistake about it. This is not subject to debate. Chinese officials themselves are saying they are using this as a tool to advance their own interests. This is not just speculation.
And how much do they have their finger on the pulse of the social justice movement that we see going on in this country, where we see all of a sudden, and this bothers me too, Peter, that we don't see like the Laken Riley death. We don't see the protest, the organization that if this was a crime that had fit the Democratic narrative, there'd be protests all over the country right now. There's no doubt about that, because they would be organized. And it's like, it seems like, I guess the CCP involved in this in some capacity, that funds these things, that puts these things together and corrupts the mind of the youth that, hey, this is something we have to fight about. We saw it with the George Floyd thing, obviously, but other ones, they rise up and they trigger these people to get out there, just, loot stores, burn down cities. And it's like, you look around and say, where are all these people coming from here?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you look at a lot of the violence that we saw in 2020 and a lot of the angry, violent protests you're seeing now, the pro-Hamas protests, in both instances, those protest movements were led by a small cell, a couple of groups, one called PSL, the other one called FRSO. As I point out in the book, they have deep, abiding ties to China. And there's even, I think, an indirect flow of money from China that are ending up with these groups. But these groups have committed themselves to China, to defending China, to fighting the United States, and they are the ones that are radicalizing a lot of these protests. The other thing that's going on is online. If you go on social media, China has a very elaborate campaign involving thousands of military officers in China. They set up each thousands of individual social media accounts posing as Americans in the United States. Half of them run social media posts that America is a hopelessly racist society. The other half of them post statements about, I only like white people, I don't like minorities, because they're trying to pit us against each other. They're trying to magnify the divisions. I'm not saying we don't have divisions in this country, but I think if there's something optimistic to gain from this book is I think they are fanning the flames. They are making it look like it's a lot worse than it actually is, at least in terms of division on some of these issues. And that's part of their campaign of divide and conquer.
This is why it seems like it's so impossible now to know what's real and what's not. Every time you
Yeah.
watch a video, it looks so authentic, and then you start reading the comments like, "Oh, this was fake." And so it's like it's so hard, especially with AI now involved in all this stuff. It's just going to get harder and harder to understand what's real and what's not. And this is why, when you turn all this noise off and you actually talk to your neighbors or people in the neighborhood, it's like when parents all want the same thing, no matter what the backgrounds are, where we come from. We want our kids to be happy, successful. We want to see them thrive. We don't want to see them get hurt. We're all trying to do the same thing here. We want to go to work, pay our bills, maybe taking a sports game, go on a trip with the wife. Like, these are the things we were all seeking to do, but it's like they're forcing this wedge in between us that we hate one another so much. And the political, everything is political. You can't even watch a sports game right now without there being some kind of political underlining involved in this. And it's so many people are just sick and tired of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And look, I quote Chinese military officers in Blood Money saying, the division and the turmoil in the United States is sapping them of their strength and of their energy. And they are fanning the flames. They have an old strategic concept that goes back to ancient China. It's called watch the fire burn from across the river. In other words, if there's a fire burning, fan the flames. But no, we're over here. We're not involved in that. Gives them plausible deniability, but it actually, causes immense problems. And that's what they're doing. Even when it comes to the trans movement, I mean, this was probably the biggest surprise to me. The transgender movement, turns out that we uncovered that two of the largest donors to the trans movement in the United States are Chinese-based billionaires. One of them is an American named Roy Singham, made his money because an investment firm partly owned by the Chinese government made him a billionaire, so he moved to China. He's poured more than $160 million into radical causes in the last few years, including the trans movement. The other one is a guy named Joe Tsai. He's the co-founder and the current chairman of Alibaba, which is like the Amazon of China. He's poured tens of millions of dollars into the trans movement. And here's the part that I think seals the deal as to what is going on here. Neither one of these individuals advocates for these positions in China itself. In other words, they're all for it in America, but in China, where, these issues are even, more dormant, they have absolutely no interest, apparently, in spreading these messages there, which indicates to me that they see it as a weapon or as a tool to be used against the United States.
And we see the power of this type of influence, Peter, too. We saw it during COVID, the power of like your people in your family, people at your job that you thought were like normal, rational people, all of a sudden went bananas during COVID, and you couldn't figure out what happened to you. Like, they started, the way that they were reacting was nuts. And it's the same thing when you see some of these parents that all of a sudden they're forcing their kids to be transgender. They're sending their kindergartner to school, a little boy in a dress. And it's like, what happened to this parent here? Like, they're not thinking of these ideas on their own. They're being influenced into believing this stuff. And it's like, you could see it. Something has happened. We didn't have any of this transgender stuff. All of a sudden, in the last 5 years, bang, we got transgenders are all over the place. Like, this thing just exploded. And it's like, you have some mothers that got 3 kids. Oh, all 3 of them are transgender, and this is all programming that's coming from somewhere, and they can't even see it.
Yeah, no, I mean it's remarkable the sort of tumult and chaos that you've seen socially in America over the last 5 to 7 years. And I'm not saying that China's causing all of it, right? I mean, there are other forces at work, but they are absolutely fanning the flames and stoking the flames to make this more amplified. I'm terribly sorry.
I'll cut it.
To make this more amplified and chaotic in America, and it's a problem because if we are divided, we are going to be less effective. And if you want to bring down a powerful country, one of the ways to do it is to tear it apart.
Yeah, and obviously it's not China alone, but I would think like 20 years ago, our biggest enemies are like, just say Russia, Iran, and China. If they were all in a room together plotting out how to destroy the United States, it would be the way that you're seeing it happen right now. I mean, it all seems like it's all working. Whatever they're doing is working. And I would imagine that China's sitting there watching our border just get flooded. They have to be laughing at us over there. And just seeing that and you have the president of the United States that's doing nothing about it. He could take direct action right now today to close the border, and he's not doing it. He's blaming this and we're blaming that and playing politics with it. And meanwhile, the country's getting infiltrated. So let's get to this here. What kind of solution said Donald Trump comes into office here, January? Pray to God. He comes into office. What does he do? This thing is so massive, and by November, it's going to be even worse. So what steps does he take to just try to stop the bleeding of the amount of fentanyl alone that's coming into this country?
Well, I think the first thing a president needs to do is needs to call out the Chinese on this and say, look, you are poisoning 100,000 Americans every year. Until this stops, we are not going to have a normal relationship with you. We are going to restrict trade. We're going to put on high tariffs. We are not going to cooperate with you on anything. We're going to consider actions that we can do that damage you. What I often think about in this context is imagine if the roles were reversed. If we were doing this to China, China would be absolutely in our face and thinking of ways that they could punish us and damage us for what we've done. That's the approach that you need to take. I think if you confronted China about this publicly, you said, we are going to slap big tariffs on your products. We are going to cease investment in your country until we start seeing changes in this area. I think you would see some changes in China's behavior. It doesn't mean that they're going to give up their objective and their goal of undermining the United States. They're going to look for other ways to do it. But at least you can start effectively dealing with some of the things that they're doing to this country.
Blood Money, Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. The link to the book is down in the description below. Obviously, this week we have the State of the Union address from Biden, if he can manage to mumble his way through it here. What do you expect? Do you expect to hear him say anything at all addressing China, mentioning China, talking about the fentanyl? What do you expect to hear from the president, if anything at all, about this?
No, I think we're going to get sort of the typical bland boilerplate that we get from him, which is China's a partner and they're a competitor. And the fentanyl crisis, he's going to treat it as a drug problem, not as a national security threat. And he's not going to say anything substantive because, again, it's deeply embarrassing to him to walk into these waters and discuss these issues. I don't expect any change from the Biden administration in this regard whatsoever. The position they've taken is absurd. Their inability to confront China on what they're doing is not going to change. And I think if he gets a second term, you're going to get more of the same.
Yeah, and so obviously you do a lot of the research when you pour yourself into these books here. What was it that you doing the research for Blood Money? Anything that kind of struck you as like where it was like an aha moment, or anything where it was like, oh my God, look at this, and you were kind of shell shocked a little bit from it?
Yeah, the trans one surprised me. I didn't expect to see that, but I also was surprised in the early stages of researching this how much the Chinese have actually written this out and described it. This is an explicit strategy of theirs. It's just that, our side is not paying attention. There was a book called Disintegration Warfare published in 2010. It's been embraced by the military. It is their operating doctrine. The way they talk about TikTok, they don't hide the fact that they view it as a Trojan horse. So the explicit nature of it, there's no theorizing here. I don't have to speculate what this might mean. It's actually laid out pretty explicitly in black and white, and that was kind of shocking to me.
What has been the feedback, before I get you out of here? What's been the feedback from the liberals, from the left, and what's been the attack on this book? What are they trying to go after? What has been the response from them?
Well, usually what they do with my books is initially is they just try to ignore it. They want it to go away. But the books end up doing well. When I first exposed the Biden's involvement with China back in 2018, they tried to ignore it. That book, Secret Empires, hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Then they started attacking me. So we're the first week out on this book. We're selling very well. I imagine we're going to do pretty well on the New York Times list. And so I think once they realize that people are reading this and getting traction, the attacks will probably come. But the main thing is the truth is there. It's well sourced. We don't use any anonymous sources. A lot of it's from leaked government documents. We name the documents, tell you how to find those documents. The research is all there. They will probably attack me personally, say that I'm anti-Chinese. But as I point out in the book, the fault here is not of the Chinese people. It's of the CCP. The CCP is the one that's doing this. You could argue that the Chinese people are the biggest victims of the CCP. So this is not anti-China. This is anti-Chinese Communist Party. They are the ones that are doing this to us.
Yeah, very well said, Peter. And God bless you for what you're doing. Blood Money, the link to the book is down there in the description below. We'll do our best to get that thing on the New York Times bestseller list. We'll do our part here. Link is down there below. Buy it for a friend. Peter Schweizer, thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time today on the Alec Show.
I enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me.